seen CSI Miami, CSI Newark, CSI Fort Lauderdale, CSI whatever. And obviously this is, you know, a Hollywood version of who we are. And so it's very important to us, both through speakers as well as through independent documentaries, to show a little bit more about who we are as a people and who the United States is, so that the same way that we try and learn all about you, so there'll be a much better mutual understanding between the countries. And with that, I'm going to let Sandra tell you a little bit about this festival, and then we'll see the film and we'll have a little discussion.
First of all, thank you. Muchas gracias, Senora. It's a pleasure to be at your school and to have the opportunity to show you something of our culture through a documentary filmmaker. And the important thing to understand, this is a grant, and the grant was given for the first time that government circulated documentary films. We sent poets and we sent writers and dancers and musicians and American movies, but not necessarily documentaries. And the reason for this is these documentaries are not made by the government. They're not paid for by the government. They are independently made. She makes it on anything she wants to make it on. All the filmmakers that we chose can make any subject they want to. We were given a list of subjects: environment, immigration, health, racism, all the issues, global issues, ecology. And what happens is every embassy in the world, where America has an embassy, is invited to participate. We ask, the State Department says, would you like 30 DVDs? And here's what they're all about. And we will send you a filmmaker and an expert to come to your country. And every country has a different reason for wanting certain people, not because they knew her in advance, but because what she made as a film was important to our embassy. When I went to Morocco, it was a completely different subject. They were interested in education. And when I went to India, it was health. So basically, what we're showing in her film is a very individualistic film made by herself and others, her autobiographical. And it's to show you a part of America and her story and immigration. So thank you very much for inviting us to be here. And after Doan, let her say a few words, we will have a Q&A, so don't run away. Okay? Stay here for questions, and we will be very happy to give you our email addresses afterwards in case you would like to contact us. And one more question. Anybody here ever make a little film of any kind?
Even on YouTube.
Even YouTube, nothing?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, I hope so.
Good.
Yes, you have.
Yes.
Is it fiction, non-fiction?
It was fiction.
Fiction.
Yes.
Did you make it on a camera with a camera?
It was like a project for class, and I was the director with another girl, and we were taking people from our class to be the actors and actresses. And so in the end, it was like a little thing.
But did you enjoy it?
Yeah.
It was difficult.
No, that's tough.
What's up? Well, making documentaries is difficult.
I know it's
No, I
but we had help, so it was
Right.
difficult for us.
No, what I mean is it's difficult to make fiction. Anything that's art, to make it well, is difficult. But documentary has specific problems. Number one, it's hard to raise money. Number two is you often don't have control of everything. In a scripted film, you have the beginning, the middle, and the end, and you know how it's going to end. Movies they make in Hollywood, it's not a question mark.
Oh, sometimes it is.
Or
Sometimes they have alternate endings.
maybe the story is
Yeah.
a question, but they know that the story is
Yeah.
going to be a question.
Yeah.
But in the case of many documentary films, it may take you 5 years to make a film or more. Doan will tell you that, because things change in the story and you have to be free to go with it. And documentaries in our country are made mostly independently. We don't get a lot of help from the government, so people make them using their credit cards, maxing out their credit cards. You know what that means? And going to debt. And but the good news is the technology has changed. So if you really want to make a film, you don't have to have an expensive camera. It's not the camera; it's the eyes that see through the camera that make the art work. So everybody in this room has an access to a camera, if it's only on your iPhone. I'm not suggesting that you become all documentary filmmakers, but I am suggesting that if you're studying literature, aren't you teaching literature? You know about storytelling, and all of you have stories. You have stories that are personal, stories that you think about other people, situations, issues. And if you have a story that's inside of you, or many stories, and you're somehow burning to get that out, documentary is a genre that is so well suited to that. So with that, let's talk to a filmmaker, and she can introduce her film a little bit, and then we see it. This is Doan.
Hi, it's very exciting for me to be here. Having come from Vietnam at the age of 3 to the United States, was something that I thought about a lot, and which you'll see in my film. But like when I was at university was basically the start of my work, was that I was trying to understand the difference between the outside world and what the news and what was written in my books, in my history classes, why they were so different from what I learned from my family. So it seemed like, maybe you can see the same with the Basque, that maybe the Castellanos have a different idea of the Basque than the Basque do. So that was the same for me when I was growing up in America. The Americans had a very different idea of who the Vietnamese were. So I saw many different war films, and I was looking for something to identify with. And usually they would use actors who were not Vietnamese, who weren't speaking Vietnamese. The film was filmed in Thailand or California. And I kept looking for something that I remembered, because I wanted to know where I came from. And I couldn't find it. So, and I kept being more and more angry about it. So I got older and thinking, you have to see this film, this documentary that won an Oscar about Vietnam. And I'd watch it and I'd say, that has nothing to do with me. And so in order to find something to identify with, I had to create it myself. And so it did start off as a paper at university. So I was writing papers about the Vietnamese experience and comparing it to the American reporting of the Vietnam War. And then it became more and more personal as I went along. So then I had the opportunity when I met some other filmmakers, and DV was a new, this is before HDV and everything. It was a new, in the 90s, it was a new format. And before you had to have a gigantic video camera or film to be able to make a film, but because DV tapes were smaller, and now I can make a film on my phone if I want to. And it's very hard to shoot with it, but you can still make these things. So the opportunity came where we were able to film more cheaply. I really thought that it was going to take me 2 months to make, maybe 3 months to make the film. It took 7 years because you can't control, for me it was my family who's the subject. So, so this is the result of a 7-year time period of work and changes in a family. So how the family's, the aftermath of a war in a family. So instead of the perspective of the soldiers or governments, this film is personal and about the relationships between people and how people deal with trauma and change and immigration. So I hope you'll enjoy it, and we'll be here afterwards to answer any questions. Thanks.
On the moment my family fell apart, it would be April 30th, 1975, the day the Vietnam War ended. Saigon was falling around us, and we barely escaped the communist when my father pulled us into the last civilian helicopter out of the country. I was only 3 years old, but I remember having to leave our home and fly all the way to a refugee camp in Arkansas. We were finally placed in Louisville, Kentucky, where we've lived since the end of the war. In Vietnam, we left half our family and a past that we have kept buried for years.
Là tính bán cái sách của mẹ, xong rồi mẹ đi chơi. Chơi Cali.
Older than the films originally in the late 90s, and my uncle is gone now, so it's, you know, it seems, I didn't realize, you know, I kept thinking that I had so much time that I could keep filming and I could keep working on it, but I had to finish at some point. I didn't want to let go of it. It was weird. It was like a growing being to me or something that I had to stop at some point, and now I see it as a document, you know, something that captured a moment in time. And sometimes people will say to me things like, oh, you were like this and that because they saw the movie, but it's like, that was a long time ago now, you know, so it's like we're always changing, and I think keeping that as a document reminds me that things always change. Although my sister and my mother still don't get along very well, but I'm working on a new film now about the women in the family in the war, and it's about rape, and my mother and my sister and myself and my aunt, who were all rape victims, but in different circumstances in the same family. And I think it's probably because things weren't resolved for us in the movie, and I wanted some understanding between my mother and sister, and you know, nothing can change. It's, you know, you have no control when you're making a documentary. You can't say, you do this, or I tried it with my father. Like, hug your brother, don't be crazy, you know? But, you know, they're military men, so I'm surprised they didn't salute each other or something. But with family, you know, they are the way they are. So in this exploration with my new film, you know, with all women in my family, we didn't share with each other our experiences. So, but I feel like when you don't address something, it stays, and it still keeps growing in you, the sort of anger and unhappiness until you address it. So I think that's something I saw with my mother and sisters. There's this something in the, you know, because my sister was raped when she was kidnapped by pirates. That's why she's alive. And they killed everybody else on the boat, save 5 women, and one was a 12-year-old girl. And so that's something we never discussed when I was a child. I knew something had happened to my sister, but they didn't tell me what it was. They just said she had an accident at sea. And so, and I wondered why they didn't tell me, because it could have protected me in my life too, to have the knowledge. But you know, it's with shame, you know, and you see that very much in the film, I think, with my father being ashamed of having a wife who had a daughter already. You know, the shame that, you know, people cause so many problems with shame. And so that's something I think I've learned from making this film, is that I haven't suffered anything by telling the truth. In fact, I've only gained and met people with similar experiences or different experiences who are willing to talk to me because I'm open. Instead of anybody saying, you know, it's odd, the feeling of wanting to hide and protect oneself. I think it's much more powerful and meaningful to be open. So I went off on a tangent.
Any questions? Did any of this seem completely unfamiliar to you? The idea of Vietnamese, you know, I don't know how much you know, but I'm assuming you know that they're immigrants from Vietnam.
There was a civil war.
There was a civil war, but was this a surprise that a family like this lives in America, or was it something that you had heard about? I'm just curious. Was this all new? Surprised. It's okay. Be surprised.
Well, I do not know much about Vietnamese, and this kind of, I mean, this in particular I don't know, but it reminds me, actually, the film reminds me of this story by Amy Tan,
Yes.
Joy Luck Club. So, I mean, I don't know. At the beginning you said you do not feel identified with any kind of films and stories, but maybe this one, well, it's non-fiction. Like, well, actually,
It's fiction.
It is fiction, yeah, yeah. I mean, her life has to do.
Yeah, those were the early inspirations for me, was Amy Tan and Maxine Hong Kingston, Woman Warrior. They were the first things I ever read where I felt like, I understand this. And so I had this, there's a book called Wild Swans, blanking on the name, but it was about a woman, a Chinese-American woman, had written about 4 generations of the women in her family. So I wanted to do something similar as a book, but I was working as a journalist and a magazine journalist, and then I thought, okay, I'll write when I get home on my book. And I could never write when I came home from work, you know, it was the last thing I wanted to do. So, you know, it was a couple of years where I was trying to write a book and not doing very well on it. And then, you know, meeting the other artists and telling them, you know, I've been trying to write this book, but I actually think it would make a good film. And then they're like, well, why not? You know, so it was, and then suddenly I'm a filmmaker. But it was, you know, very strange for me because I had some, you know, when I was a child, I learned some things about, you know, making documentaries in school, but it was, you know, something about the French Revolution or something. And so it had nothing to do with me. And so I never thought that it was something that I would do. But I think that's the kind of amazing thing about life is you never know which direction, especially with the way things now, like in my father's generation, his resume is 2 jobs. You know, the Vietnamese Air Force, and then underneath he's a computer programmer for 20 years. That you know, that's relevant. And then he had a job as a gas attendant at the airport. But that's it. That's all he's done. Whereas, you know, I have like 50 things on my resume, and you know, I think the world is changing all the time. You know, you don't know what technology is going to be in place. You don't know what people will be doing. You know, I think back to 10 years ago when this film was being made, no one had mobile phones. No one had, not very few people, like some people had email, but not everyone. And you know, you don't know which way the world will change. So it's, and I think with my parents, I can't imagine that at, you know, at age 34 and 37, they suddenly had to leave, and they didn't expect to leave, to suddenly leave everything in one moment. And I think about that, like in, you know, for me, like what would it be like to suddenly at that age be established in your life, and you suddenly have to change careers, you suddenly have to learn another language. And I think in some ways the upheavals all over the world have been sending people everywhere, like and people are moving to different parts of the country, or the economics are changing, so you never know where you're going to be. And your expectations of life, before people, you're born in the town, you die in the town, and you know everyone, but the world is much different now.
Have all of you been born in this part of Spain? Yes. No one?
So here.
Well, I'm from Poland.
So you came here when you were how old?
No, like 5 years ago. Yeah. No.
Your whole family?
They're in Poland. Yeah. No, but it's different. I mean, I came here because I wanted to study Spanish, basically, and Spanish culture, and well, in the end I decided to. Yeah,
it's an upheaval, no? It's
A change.
a change.
Well, yeah, but I mean, for me the change was actually, I mean, I wanted it.
Right.
I was seeking for a change, so it was different. I was not forced to do it.
Right.
And there's also the other difference that you're not responsible for anybody but yourself. But here's a man who is thinking about taking care of his family. If he had stayed behind and he had been killed, who would have taken care of his family? And then he goes to this country where he had the language somewhat, right, because of his studies in the military. But starting all over, having to take care of them, it's hard.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really grateful for this opportunity for different reasons. But just because you mentioned the woman warrior, and I usually teach, and I will be teaching that, and some of my students will be, reading and discussing it in our second term next year. So I think that it is incredible, this opportunity, because Maxine Hong Kingston is fiction, art debate, whereas here is a documentary, and I was really amazed and shocked, because I mean, you must be really brave, a woman warrior yourself, because to show and to have your own family engaged in this, you know, and involved in this, it must have been extraordinary. I mean, I guess you might have problems with them because you are showing everybody and you are exposing, you know, their secrets to everybody, and I think that's really well extraordinary.
I'm glad you, thank you. I'm glad you brought up Maxine Kingston because she's now my Facebook friend. But it's, I think thinking back to it, she really inspired me because she talks so openly about her family and her work. And the book China Men is about her father, grandfather, great-grandfather, you know, through Hawaii as an immigrant in the plantations, her father in New York, the city in the 1950s. Her grandfather building the railroads, and it was her imagined story of her family. But I felt like I had the opportunity to do that in a way that was nonfiction. You know, that I was trying to do what she was trying to do, to show the story of her family. But I had a camera. You know, like I had the opportunity. So with the technology changing, I could show somebody in a more direct way. And I think each type of work that we do affects people in different ways, no matter what profession you choose. Whether you're a teacher or whether you're an investment banker or you know, any profession you do, is the way that the choices you make and the way you communicate with people and who you choose to communicate with. We don't realize that all of these connections are in a way life-changing, and the connections at home. For me, you know, there's this man, my father. I lived with him, but I didn't know him. I never. We were afraid of him, you know, when I was a child. And so for him to, when I asked him, may I interview him, he was 3 hours late. Because I think he didn't want to tell me, you know. And my whole life, I never had the guts to ask him, like, what happened to you? What's your story? And I was shocked at what I didn't know. I mean, he had all these brothers and sisters that he never told me about, who died or were on the other side. And for him to hold all of that in himself, he was afraid that the information would hurt us because it hurt him so much. I think felt like he had to be strong because he was this person, he was a military man, he had no house, same village, so, you know, they do interact with each other. So I think it did make them want to change their lives, you know, and also my aunts who live in the United States, they were afraid to return also. So they went back to Vietnam after seeing my movie because they were very fearful. Because the moment when you leave a place and it's, you know, under destruction like that, your home, seeing your home like that, it's like you don't want to ever see that image again. Seeing something is so powerful. So now they go back and they're, you know, in contact with the family there, the relatives there, and so we've you know, through technology, Skyping, you know, I can Skype my cousins, like we're, you know, I get messages from my cousin on Messenger, you know, so it's funny how all, you know, the world has brought us closer together.
Anybody have any other questions? Because you probably have other classes. I don't know what the time constraints are.
How did your family feel about the film? What they told you?
Did you hear her question?
She asked, how did the family feel about the film? They felt like I represented them accurately, which I was glad about. I was a little worried that my mother would think that I was being unkind to her, but my mother, that's the way she is. It's the truth, you know. So no one feels like they're inaccurately portrayed, and they all had their time. They're all able to give their story in their own words. I didn't tell them to say anything. They said what they said, and I put it together. But when I had my premiere in San Francisco, my mother was sitting next to me in the movie theater. My sister was there. And there's that part where my sister says, she loves me, but she loves herself more than she loves me. And my mother says, thank you, during the movie. And so for them, and my mother would remember things from the movie. It's like that time you said, you know, Daddy hates my past. He does not hate my past. Like, she will use it as a reason to argue, you know. But I think it's because they feel so guilty about what happened to her that they don't want to take responsibility for what happened to her because they're afraid to address it, you know, the rape that happened to her. And I think this part of mean, she's messy and she collects lots of things, but she's a good mother. You know, she has her problems, and everywhere we go, she gets left behind. Like, we'll be at the movie theater, it's like, where is she? Where, you know, and she's always trying to make us wait for her because we didn't wait. So, you know, it's like the family pattern repeating itself over and over. My mother's always like, let's go, 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 go. And my sister is gone. And, you know, I feel like every day is the fall of Saigon, you know, like, with my family. So, but with the, yeah, they felt, and also I think it was a good release for them to be able to talk about it. It was surprising because I was afraid my sister was afraid of being exposed because it's a very personal story for her. You know, she exposes herself very much, and with this new film even more so. But nothing bad happened, you know, and so when we were having screenings in California, there's a lot of screenings there, my family came with me, and all these people wanted to talk to them, so it also opened their lives. You know, my father had like a fan club, you know, talking to. Oh yeah, it's been in 16 countries now, and you know, so I get, you know, emails from people from Afghanistan or who can relate to it, people in Sweden. It's very strange to me, but it's like if you tell your own truth, you know, we're all human beings. You know, we may seem different in you know, our language or the way we appear or something, but we're all the same. We all have the same needs and wants, and you know, we all love and we all feel. So that, I think that never changes, you know. And we have people we love, and sometimes the people we love are far from us. Sometimes there's a problem, but I think we all relate to those same issues with each other. So I was really glad that I think it did. My father then, every time he met some young man, he would always want to talk about the war because he never talked about it. He's like, you know, in Vietnam, my brother, you know, he would talk about these things. He would seek people to tell his story to. It's like we couldn't stop him anymore. And now he's terrible. He's on the internet all the time, like Vietnamese radio, Vietnamese television. It's like he missed all this time in Kentucky with nothing, and now he just I'm like, Dad, it's so loud in here. Turn off the radio, you know. And he's emailing his friends, and you know, so his life has really changed.
People ask the question, can documentaries really change life or lives or things? And they can, obviously. They changed a great deal in your family.
I think they absolutely change things because it's unnatural. It's not natural to have a camera, you know, on all the time. You know, I think in some ways it's like my sister would have never confronted my mother, ever, had the camera not been with her. So I was saying before, I think that the family used the camera in different ways. Like for me, I used it to learn about my family and record them, but at the same time as a protection, like a shield from them. Like, don't yell at me, I've got the camera, you know. And for my uncle, it was to record his life before he died. You know, it was like he was ready to, it was his historian. And for my father, it was his therapist, you know, his place to release emotion. For my mother, it was like a place for everyone to see her, like, look at me, and like, you know, for my sister, it was her weapon. It was like, come on, camera. And it was funny because right before that scene where she confronts my mother, she says, I'm gonna apologize to Mom and Dad for being, you know, slowing everything down. So she just told the cameraman, come with me, And so we come with her, and then she said, why did you leave me? And I was like, you know, I just couldn't believe it. I was just standing there like, what did you do to me, you know? So it was, and it's also funny when your family, when you're, as I was saying before, as a filmmaker versus a person who is in the family, I had very different roles. So as someone in my family having an argument is terrible. You know, it's like, oh, this is terrible. But as a filmmaker, it's like, okay, keep filming, follow her. You know, like it's really weird because you have two impulses. Like, please don't fight. No, keep fighting. You know. Yeah, it took me 7 years to make the film. It had all kinds of ups and downs with funding, and at first I didn't know what I was doing. You know, I was a kid. You know, I was like 20, 25, and I'd never made a film before, so I thought, oh, this will be easy. And I had a lot of good luck, but I just really, you know, I wasn't mature enough as a human being to even hear what happened to my family. I couldn't watch my father's interview for 2 years without crying. So it took me time to sort of understand my family. And I had this idea that I would make a movie about Vietnamese people after the war, the Vietnamese side. So I filmed 50 people. It was a lot to cut down, but
How many hours did you shoot?
like almost 200, I think.
I realize what that is. This is a 58-minute film. She
Yeah.
has to look through those 200
Well,
hours.
talk a little bit about going to the archives too, just the whole
Yeah.
process.
We have time? It's okay?
Yeah, well, if they are willing to stay, yeah.
If anybody has to leave,
If somebody
please go.
has an exam or.
But, so I got to go to the National Archives of the United States and the archives of many television news networks and to look for footage. So as I was looking, it was hard to represent the war from the Vietnamese side because everything was shown from the American side. So I went to the army footage of the United States and they had filmed Vietnamese people like the pilots and the soldiers, but no one had looked at them ever. So I went, there was an archive opening, they were like, whoa, this was way back there. So they gave me this reel of film. And so I'm the first person watching it since it was filmed. And so I got to use a lot of different footage like that. It was a huge amount of discovery. It was like the best research paper that I could ever do because it was related to myself, but also was history. But I think, growing up, I never thought my family story was interesting. And so when people saw my movie on television in the United States, many friends from my youth wrote to me saying, I never knew that happened to you. I had teachers saying, why didn't you tell me? I would have helped you. But, the truth is like in the moment, no one really knows what to do. Like, what is it said that Kierkegaard said? Hindsight, like life can only be understood backwards, but can be only lived forwards. So that's how I feel about this film. It's looking backwards, but I have to look forward and see where else my life is going. Anything else?
Do any of you have, you don't have to tell us what they are, but did this bring to mind stories that have happened in your family or other people you know? Not the same kind of story necessarily, but stories that may have meant something to you that people told you about that maybe you would want to write about?
Well, maybe they haven't told you about. I mean, it's interesting. We've been talking a lot because we've been traveling through the north. And when you were your age, you're younger, but it feels like life goes on forever, and things that happened, for you guys, for instance, the Spanish Civil War must be like the Renaissance or something. It's so far back. But what you'll find out as you get older, that you realize that it wasn't really that long ago in the grand scheme of things. And if you've got grandparents or great-grandparents or anybody or any of the stuff that's gone on since Franco died, it really would be a great gift to interview them, neighbors, family members, and whether it's a matter of just asking them questions and then writing notes afterwards or putting it on tape or filming it. It's a gift to them in a sense, and it's a gift to you, and it's a gift to your children, because it goes like that. It really goes like that. So you should think about your own stories and the stories of people around you, because you'll find, a friend of mine and I were talking, his brother just recently died, and we've sort of been joking with what we call in English gallows humor, but we've been saying life, it's the kind, nobody gets out of it alive. I mean, everybody has some sort of tragedy, difficult moment, and it doesn't even have to be bad. I mean, not everything is bad, but we all have stories, and they're very enriching. And to have them and share them, I think, brings you closer to other people, and it gives people greater empathy, and it gives you the ability to reach out more to other people and help them in their difficult times, and for them to help other people, which I sort of believe is what it's all about.
What year in school are you?
Third.
Third year. And do many of you have an idea of maybe what you want to do when you finish school?
Bueno, buenas tardes. Vamos a empezar con una entrevista a la persona responsable de la American Documentary Showcase. que nos va a introducir en su asociación, en la película, en el maravilloso mundo de los documentales, y vamos a hacer esta entrevista en inglés, con lo cual, bueno, pues sentimos mucho por todos aquellos socios que igual no puedan seguirla, pero bueno, así hacemos un esfuerzo y os animamos a aprender esta maravillosa lengua. So, we are going to start with an introduction to the American Documentary Showcase. Feel free to speak, to tell us whatever you want.
Thank you.
Right.
Hola. My name is Sandra Rush, and I'm here along with Doan for the American Documentary Showcase, which is a program that is sponsored by the Department of State of the United States, Bureau of Education and Cultural Affairs. And the purpose of this program is to bring to countries around the world documentary filmmakers. They must be American citizens, and their subjects must be American subjects in the sense that they have some representation of our culture. And to get into this is very, very difficult because we reviewed several hundreds of films, and only 30 per year were chosen. And those 30 had to do with the arts, with racism, with immigration, with ecology, with education, etc. And today we were very thankful to your university and to the embassy in Madrid, and to all of you who have helped us, that we brought with us a filmmaker and her film, which will be shown over the weekend in a festival experimental in Madrid. So the point is, we are showing these films. They are not made by the government, they are independently made, so there are no rules on what you can and cannot say. You can pick anything within those subjects, and we are trying to show you another side of America. Perhaps you're used to seeing American films that are Hollywood films. Nothing wrong with that, but it's not the only side of America. So this is an example of our cultural, social, and political life, and we're delighted to be here.
And we are really proud. Because this is a real nice chance, because it's not usual, it's not common, and we are really happy. So thank you for being here as well.
Muchas gracias.
Okay, so we can start. Okay, so before starting, I would like just to know something about you, something that our audience need to know or you want to share. So.
I made a documentary about my family in the Vietnam War. I left Vietnam when I was 3 years old and came to the United States and didn't know much about my own parents and their history, because as immigrants they went directly to work and didn't talk about their experience in the war. But I heard some things, and when I was growing up I found that the things my parents told me was very different from what I learned in school and from news history. And so I decided to make a film about my family and the war. Just happenstance, and it was based on the fact that nothing I saw represented my family's experiences as Vietnamese and Vietnamese Americans. So I made something to answer what I didn't know already.
Yeah, so there was something that needed to be told in a sense, no? We need to know. Okay, good. So we are going to start with the interview. Okay, more or less we have several questions. Just feel free to answer the ones you want. So, okay. So did you face a lot of opposition writing and directing this film?
No, and in the United States it's pretty easy to do what you want without, I don't know what you mean by opposition from whom, but from my family or from...
Well, in your case we can speak about many different kinds of opposition. It can be your family, it can be, I don't know, government rules, I don't know.
Absolutely no problems with the government at all, but mostly with financing the film. That was probably where, not opposition, but that was the most difficult part of making the film, was funding it. So a lot of it was self-funded in the beginning, and then I was able to get grants from nonprofit organizations to make the film. So I felt a lot of support, but it took a long time. It took 7 years to make the film.
7 years. So that's quite important, because one of the questions was how much of this story was autobiographical. I guess it's a lot, but can you explain us why a little bit?
So my own story of the first time I returned to Vietnam, I was 25 years old, and it had been over 20 years since I left Vietnam, and I discovered that my father had 2 brothers that he never told me about. One was a communist and fought against him in the war, and the other was against the war, and he shot himself in the hand because he opposed the war. So I didn't know there was such a division in my family in that way. When we left Vietnam, we left my sister behind on the last helicopter, and we were evacuated by the United States government out of Saigon and refugees in the United States, and then placed in Kentucky. So the story is entirely autobiographical and nonfiction.
And you know if there are more families like that?
Many.
Many. So it's something common in a sense.
I would say that the only reason my family story is special is because it has the examples of many experiences of Vietnamese Americans. That there were many boat people who came to move to the United States, and there were also people evacuated by helicopter. There were people who had divisions in their family, but in my family we had all of those conditions. So that's what made, I think, the story, it's very common, but yet we had many examples. So.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, the film is amazing. I really like it. Okay, in trying to reinvent something that people know, so as you know, everybody think about Vietnam in a very particular way, but is there any moment when you think, I don't know, oh my God, what am I doing here? It's going to work.
It was difficult to make a film like that, because sometimes people would say to me, oh, well, isn't there already a book about Vietnamese people? You know, like as if they were only one story, but there are so many stories that people have. So I went, you know, and people thought, you know, it'd be something like Apocalypse Now or an American war movie about soldiers, but it was a very different perspective. And at times, you know, it was a struggle, because I as someone who is coming from the field as a new person, someone who doesn't have much experience, someone who's not a Hollywood director, I didn't know what I was doing, but I learned by doing. And so I think that's what you sort of have to do as an outsider in some ways, is to find a way to work with the system to communicate. And
you say you learned by doing.
Yeah.
So tell us something about, because that's really interesting.
So when I first applied for a grant from PBS, which is the public broadcasting system of the United States, it's like the BBC of the United States. I applied for a grant, and I wrote about my film, and it sounded interesting to them, but they asked me for a rough cut. I didn't know what a rough cut was. So I just gave them bits of this and that, and they were like, where's your rough cut? And so I just didn't know what I was doing, and it's like, oh, well, I don't know. It's like, we'll come back when you have a rough cut. So I didn't go to film school. So I had to, you know, go back and learn how to make films, learning from other people, and, you know, trying it myself. And as someone who, I mean, I was a journalist, I knew how to write, but I didn't, and I knew how to interview, but I didn't know how to make a film, really. So I had to, now everything I know by experience. You know, you trial and error. It's like, okay, well, you shoot this interview like this, that was good, or that didn't work. So you just learn new ways of doing things. And so I think in some ways, when you come from not the tradition, but something different, you learn to execute a different style, you know, and because no one's telling you what to do. And it's like, you know, being a musician, like a punk musician or something, you know, it's like no structure, just trying to learn how to do it. So it's like I learned backwards. I filmed everything, and then I learned how to make a film after I already did.
Good. Were you worried about any leaks, about personal mistakes?
Well, there was nothing but one mistake after the other. You know, that's how I learned. I feel like when a child learns to walk, a child doesn't immediately stand up and walk like a horse or a cow. You know, a child falls again and again, and I feel like that's how humans learn, is by mistakes. You know, and history is, I think, and that's why it's important to learn from history, because we learn from our mistakes. And I think one of the greatest things I've learned about war is that, for me, war is a mistake, conflict is a mistake. We must try and understand each other and come to an agreement and understanding, because the lives that are affected, and for generations, are too great to have conflict. You know, death of a population or suppression, that the price is too great. And I think it's really important for people to look at our past and say, you know, where did we go wrong here, and what can we do differently?
Yeah, that's. I mean, this fantastic. Now I'm thinking about what you are saying, because this is really catching. So can we speak about kind of overall message about something that you really want to say? Because after the film, I've been speaking with my friend about the film, and he told me, at the end, that's true. War is stupid. That's the real message about it. It can split family into two different parties. It's nonsense. So can we say that, in a sense, that the real message of?
Yeah, I think that it was something that I had so many regrets growing up. I thought, you know, why did my family leave Vietnam? Why did we have to suffer in this way? Why did so many people die? And certainly there was something else that could be done instead of who is more powerful is right. And in the case of the Vietnam War, the people who you think are the most powerful actually didn't win. It was the spirit of the people, you know, in some ways. And I feel like in the United States, we have so many different cultures coming together. Had I grown up in Vietnam, I would have a very different perspective. In the United States, you know, we have very many different perspectives. You know, you can be a communist in the United States and it's not a problem. You can be, but you can be of any sort of belief system. You can be from the Tea Party, and we all live together in one place. And I think that is one of the most beautiful things about the United States, and what I've learned to appreciate since, you know, when I was growing up in the United States, I didn't appreciate it. When I left and returned to Vietnam and went to other countries, I could see the value in many different perspectives. And I think that's the lucky thing, is in this day and age, we have the internet, we have the ability to communicate in so many ways with people, and to read newspapers from all over the world, to watch television broadcasts, YouTube videos, everything from all over the world. And this is something that makes us able to understand each other and find a way to make peace and to help each other with conflict. So this is, you know, the technology has brought us in a place where I think war is less necessary, and I hope will never be necessary again. But there is human nature, and I understand that. But whatever I can do to facilitate the peace process, because of what my family has suffered in the war, I would like to share with the world, and that's why I'm here in Spain and in the Basque Country.
Yeah, hopefully now everybody thinks that peace is possible, so we hope that it happens really, really soon everywhere. Okay, so thank you very much. It's going to be the end of the interview. It's going to be something formal. Eso relativo. Okay? Pues eso es todo, muchas gracias, y ya sabéis que nos podéis seguir viendo pues a través de la asociación Hevenday, para el fomento pues, de la educación, la literatura, el cine y todo lo que queréis compartir con nosotros. Gracias.